In a city called Moulton in England, there is a church called Carey Baptist Church. Now this church goes back deep into the 1700s, and they ended up having a pastor that is an important figure in Baptist history. His name was William Carey. Now when William Carey went there, he was a cobbler or a shoemaker. What's interesting about him, he was so devoted to the work of the ministry that he learned Greek, Hebrew, and other languages in the process in order to learn and know the Bible better. He read a great deal of what he could. And he became friends with other Baptist ministers, another one of whom was Andrew Fuller, who is someone that I'd like to talk about later. But they really were very good friends, and they were perfect in the time that they were in. But William Carey was in an interesting period of time. And the reason for that is there was a great deal of Calvinism to an extreme at the time, or what some might say hyper-Calvinism. And it could go to the point to where there was an understanding or a belief that you don't go tell others about the gospel, that's not your place. And that doesn't really fit what we see in Scripture. That doesn't fit what we know to be true. And this is something that he had to wrestle with. He wrestled with this. Carey began to read about people going into other nations and giving the gospel, and it really resonated with him. In fact, in his shop where he made shoes, he actually had maps, and he had made his own kind of custom maps with information on those areas and the beliefs of those areas, the amount of Christians in those areas and such. It really started to take hold in his heart. And he started to talk to other Baptist ministers. And why is that important? He wanted to get their help and their input, and he wanted to really bring up this, and he was put down for it. In fact, one minister kind of made the idea that if God wanted converts of the heathens, then He wouldn't need you and He wouldn't need me. He wouldn't use us. And that's actually kind of arrogant, isn't it? And it could be implied as lazy. Whether or not that was their intended meaning, but definitely it wasn't right. But this is something that he wrestled with, and he reasoned out in a book that he wrote this, and that was, if the Great Commission was only for the apostles, then baptism is only for the apostles too. What separates us? What's one of our distinctives? Baptism. Baptism of a believer only. Baptism in full immersion only. Okay? But if baptism is for us, so is the Great Commission. Now that's kind of hard to defend against. And the reason is, that's logically thought out. That is what we're called to do. Not just to preach and teach and baptize, but to literally go out and give the gospel. And he preached a sermon where there was a tagline he used in it: expect great things and attempt great things. That's the kind of thing we should be saying today too. We should expect great things from God, and we should attempt great things for God. That doesn't mean big numbers. It means bold, decisive, biblical action. Preach the truth, stand for the truth, and give the truth. The church that's there, he pastored there for only so many years, and he ended up helping to later on start the Baptist Missionary Society in October of 1792. And he was the first missionary. He would go out to India. So the church that is there in Moulton today, they're called Carey Baptist Church. They have a modern, beautiful building, and some of the nicest people I think I've ever met. But next to where the church is a building that had his actual workshop in. We actually got to see it, along with some of the items that were in it. And it made firm some of the things that this guy worked bivocationally and was dedicated even in his vocation that was not ministry focused. He still became ministry focused. Inside the church, there were some other things that they had, but they had a room with a mural of his life. And they even said something I found to be interesting and I took to heart. They said, some could say that we are making him an idol, but we are not. We want to talk about one of our pastors that made an impact, and we got to help and see what God did. And to tell that story, we have to tell his story. We have to tell the story of the instrument that God used, this minister. And so it's a story that needs to be told, because there was a time where many did not think about missions, especially foreign missions. And William Carey would go off to India, where it would be many years before he would actually have a single convert. He would have children die, he would have a spouse die, but ultimately he made a huge impact. Or let me say this, God made a huge impact through him. Great work was done. Many were saved. Institutions were started to teach and to help introduce the gospel. Oftentimes, William Carey is called the father of modern missions. Well, at the very least, he was the first major individual to do this, but it's left an impact. And the church there at Moulton helps remind us that we still have work to do. There is still Great Commission work ahead of us, and we need to remember that work and to keep on active in that work.